They actually did it, in the middle of a full-blown roster crisis. With the entire basketball world watching every move they made, the Indiana Fever front office chose chaos over common sense. This wasn't just a questionable basketball decision or a minor roster mistake. To many fans, it felt like a direct slap in the face to everyone invested in the Caitlin Clark era. The news broke, and the reaction exploded instantly. After holding on to their developmental contract spot for weeks like it was some kind of golden ticket, the Fever finally used it, and not on a forward or center. Instead, they signed an 8th guard. While fans and analysts everywhere were begging for frontcourt toughness and paint protection after the team was physically overpowered on opening night, Amber Cox and Kelly Krauskopf doubled down on adding even more backcourt depth. To frustrated fans, the move felt completely disconnected from reality, a decision that ignored the team's biggest weakness and reinforced every fear surrounding the Fever's roster construction. What should have been a simple roster update quickly turned into a firestorm, with many believing the front office is steering Caitlin Clark's rookie season in the wrong direction before it even truly begins.
Well, my goodness. Herb Simon. In case you don't know who Herb Simon is, he owns the Indiana Pacers. He also owns the Indiana Fever. You got your ears on, Herb. I understand you're 91 years old. Whoever your handler is, whoever is running the entire basketball operations, something's got to be done. You got to do something about the leadership with the Indiana Fever, the front office, and one Stephanie White.
The math behind this decision is what makes it feel so devastating to fans. Before this latest signing, the Indiana Fever already had 7 guards on the active roster. 7. You already have a generational superstar in Caitlin Clark, the elite scoring ability of Kelsey Mitchell, and additional backcourt depth of players like Raven Johnson, Natasha Howard, Sophie Cunningham, Lexi Hull, and Chatori Walker-Kimbrough. For most franchises, that would be more than enough guard talent to build around. But somehow, the Fever front office decided they needed an 8th guard instead of addressing the team's glaring lack of frontcourt depth. To frustrated fans, it feels like the organization is building a crowded backcourt where talent gets buried and spacing disappears, while ignoring the physical presence desperately needed in the paint. What makes the situation even worse is that the flaws were exposed in brutal fashion during the Fever's season opener against the Dallas Wings. What was supposed to be a celebration of a new era turned into a painful 107-104 overtime loss that highlighted every weakness on the roster. On paper, the Fever stars delivered exactly what you could ask for. Caitlin Clark finished with 20 points and 7 assists. Kelsey Mitchell exploded for 30 points, and Aaliyah Boston dominated with 23 points and 7 rebounds. Together, the Big Three combined for 73 points and looked capable of carrying the franchise into contention. But it still wasn't enough. The moment Aaliyah Boston left the floor, the entire structure of the team seemed to fall apart. Dallas became more physical, attacked the paint relentlessly, and exposed Indiana's lack of size and interior toughness. Meanwhile, the bench struggled badly, with the backup unit failing to provide efficient scoring or defensive resistance when the starters needed relief. And then came the moment that pushed fan frustration to another level.
Boston, you heard me say it. Stockton and Malone style. Stephanie White even said Stockton and Malone style. Before she even got hired, I was talking about John Stockton to feeding Karl Malone, and it was deadly. Nobody could stop it. And there has not been a damn thing that showed any team in this league could stop Caitlin Clark feeding Aaliyah Boston. But after 14 games, Stephanie White has said, nah.
The lesson from the Dallas game could not have been more obvious. The Indiana Fever were out-rebounded, overpowered physically, and completely dominated in the paint during the most important moments of the game. With Monique Billings sidelined due to injury, a massive hole opened in the frontcourt rotation, and the remaining depth failed to provide much support. Natisha Heedman struggled to make an impact, while Damiris Danas never seemed to find a rhythm in her limited minutes. The one real bright spot was Saxton Timpson, who scored 11 points on perfect shooting efficiency, yet Stephanie White only gave her 18 minutes on the floor. Everything about the game screamed that this roster desperately needs more size, more toughness, and more reliable frontcourt help. Aaliyah Boston cannot be expected to carry the physical burden every single night while playing heavy minutes against elite competition. She needs a dependable backup center, another physical forward, and players capable of protecting the rim and controlling rebounds. Fans saw it immediately. Analysts saw it. Opposing teams definitely saw it. But instead of addressing the obvious weakness, the Fever front office doubled down by adding yet another guard. To many fans, it feels like pure insanity, repeating the same roster-building mistakes while expecting different results. Critics have been warning about this imbalance since the moment the organization drafted Raven Johnson, while quality forwards were still available on the board. Since then, the Fever have continued stacking guards by bringing back Chatori Walker-Kimbrough and extending Lexi Hull on a multi-year deal, almost as if they believe backcourt depth alone can solve every problem. Meanwhile, the frontcourt relies heavily on Aaliyah Boston and a group of role players who have struggled to provide consistency. The roster construction feels deeply flawed, and to frustrated supporters, it's starting to look less like bad planning and more like a team undermining its own potential from within. And somehow, things only became even more chaotic after that.
Yeah, by the way, you're not doing all of that stuff that Stephanie White's been talking about. Oh, you're going into the blue tent and all that. You're not doing that unless there is an issue. Otherwise, that's the first time I've ever heard of that in the history of sports, me covering it and or consuming it. First time ever. We have signed a guard, Bree Hall, to a player developmental contract. We have signed guard Bree Hall. I got nothing against Bree Hall, but it's a guard. I mean, we needed guards like we need to catch rabies. I mean, seriously. Like we all need the swine flu.
The timing of this developmental signing made the reaction from fans even more intense. Developmental roster spots are supposed to be used on young players with upside, players you believe can grow into important pieces for the future. But in professional sports, timing and context matter just as much as talent. By using this spot on another guard right now, immediately after a game that exposed the team's lack of size and interior toughness, the Indiana Fever front office sent a message many fans did not want to hear. To them, it felt like the organization was openly signaling that the front court is not considered an urgent problem, despite what everyone watched happen against Dallas. Instead of adjusting course, the Fever appear to be doubling down on a small ball philosophy, even after getting physically overwhelmed in the paint on national television. That decision now puts Stephanie White in an incredibly difficult position. She was brought in as the experienced basketball mind who could maximize the connection between Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, a partnership many hope could become the modern version of an elite inside-out duo. But building that kind of dominant two-player system becomes much harder when the supporting roster lacks balance. It's difficult to create spacing for Caitlin Clark when defenses don't respect the front court depth and can focus almost entirely on swarming the perimeter. Fans feel like the front office is handing Stephanie White an incomplete roster and expecting her to produce championship-level results anyway, like giving someone a box full of screwdrivers and asking them to build a skyscraper. And once that realization set in, fan frustration exploded even further.
Happening here. Fever front office had the option of hiring someone who would make Caitlin Clark more comfortable, but you chose to feed the clan that hates Caitlin Clark. And you've done this several times already. It can't be coincidence. Fever doesn't deserve CC. Free CC. Are you people afraid to get a big? Nothing against Hall, but a guard is not going to solve your problems. Again, you need a big. Never mind. This unserious franchise is turning the Indiana Fever into South Carolina women's basketball. Good hell to the Lord have mercy. We don't need that. Another guard. I guess they didn't see that.
The backlash from fans is no longer about just one player or a single roster move. It's the result of weeks of frustration building over a series of front office decisions that many believe continue to ignore the team's most obvious problems. Caitlin Clark's fan base has become one of the most engaged and analytical audiences in women's basketball, paying attention to every transaction, every lineup adjustment, and every strategic decision. They've consistently questioned the Fever's roster construction and warned that the current approach wouldn't hold up against more physical teams. After the loss to Dallas, many fans feel those concerns were fully validated. They argued the roster lacked depth in the front court, and the game seemed to expose exactly that weakness. Now, the decision to add an eighth guard instead of addressing size and interior defense is being viewed by frustrated supporters as undeniable proof that the front office may be misreading what this team actually needs to succeed. The pressure now shifts directly onto Stephanie White, who faces a difficult situation heading into upcoming press conferences. If she publicly supports the move, some fans may see her as disconnected from the obvious issues affecting the roster. But if she questions the decision, it could create visible tension between the coaching staff and the front office early in the season. That's why so many people see this as more than just a developmental signing. They see it as a move that could create serious internal pressure within the organization if the team continues to struggle.
Problems who can create rotations to allow Aaliyah and Caitlin's job to be.
To that point, I've watched.
Not only that, but by all means, send your coach in to do an interview with one of the biggest Caitlin Clark haters on the planet. I'm gonna use a word you don't hear very often anymore: cahoots. Are you motherfuckers all in cahoots together? Y'all got that CBA and said, nah, we're good. We got it now. I hate to break it to you. The one thing you better be concerned about is that media rights deal. Because there are ways that networks can go back to leagues and say, we're not getting what we signed up.
The pressure surrounding Wednesday night's game against the Atlanta Dream has now reached another level. After the Fever struggles against Dallas, many fans believe opposing teams have already identified Indiana's biggest weakness: interior defense. Atlanta is expected to attack the paint aggressively, knowing the Fever currently lack reliable front court depth behind Aaliyah Boston. That concern becomes even more serious if Boston gets into foul trouble or simply wears down from carrying such a heavy workload. Fans are asking the same question over and over: who steps in when the team needs size, rebounding, and rim protection? Right now, many feel the roster still doesn't provide a convincing answer. Even the discussion around the reported $19 ticket prices for the Atlanta game has become symbolic of the growing frustration, with some supporters viewing it as a reflection of declining confidence in the team's direction rather than just a promotional offer. The excitement surrounding the Caitlin Clark era was built on the idea that the Fever were constructing a future championship contender, but recent roster decisions have left many fans questioning whether the organization truly understands its own weaknesses. Critics argue that the current roster philosophy is too guard-heavy, lacks balance, and continues to ignore the need for consistent frontcourt production and bench scoring. To frustrated supporters, the issue is no longer just about one signing. It's about a pattern of decisions that they believe fails to maximize the potential of both Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston.
You're a used car salesman. You're a fucking ambulance chaser. You're the worst of the... I mean, what are we doing? Bogus bill of goods. I mean, did they send you in undercover to try to kill her career at this point? I mean, all this conspiracy stuff, remember how many conspiracies have turned out to be real? That everybody thought everybody was crazy? What is happening here? This is wild shit, to be honest with you. And I swear to God, if the Pacers...
The pressure surrounding the Indiana Fever is reaching a boiling point as the countdown to Wednesday's matchup against the Atlanta Dream continues. With only days remaining before tip-off, Stephanie White faces the difficult challenge of finding ways to cover the roster's most obvious weaknesses, particularly in the front court. Many fans believe the organization still has not addressed the team's biggest issue, size, rebounding, and interior defense. And frustration is growing after the decision to add yet another guard instead of front court help. If the Fever struggle physically in the paint again against Atlanta, supporters fear the criticism surrounding the team could explode even further across social media and sports media alike. At this stage, fans are no longer interested in promises or long-term explanations. They want a roster that properly supports stars like Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston and gives the team a real chance to compete. The latest signing has sparked major debate within the fan base, with many questioning whether the front office has already wasted one of its last meaningful roster opportunities or whether there could still be another move coming behind the scenes. Others are wondering if Stephanie White is being placed in an impossible position, expected to deliver results with an unbalanced roster that doesn't fully match her system. The next game now feels larger than just another regular season matchup. For many fans, it represents a critical moment that could shape the direction and perception of the Fever's entire season moving forward.